Welcome back to the First Gnostic Church of Christ. We're on video number 5, the Gospel of Philip. In our last video, we talked about this ram called the Canoma and how it provides for us challenges, temptations, trials, and tribulations as opportunity to grow as people, as a person. Philip points out wisdom can be found in everything. Wisdom can be found in this world, can be found even in death. The ultimate wisdom, of course, is through the feminine, the Sophia. Once we have ascertained the feminine as a human species, we will find equilibrium and ascend. So let's pick up from where we left off in the section titled Tame and Wild Animals. Philip says some animals are tame, such as the bull, the donkey, and the like, while others are wild and live off in the wild. People plow fields with tame animals, and as a result, people are nourished together with animals, rather tame or wild. So also the perfect human plows with powers that are tame and prepares everything to come into being. Thus, the whole place has stability, good and evil, right and left. The Holy Spirit tends everything and rules over all the powers, whether tame or wild, and running loose. For the Spirit is resolved to corral them, so that they cannot escape if they wish. Philip is talking about the pathway in which you are able to manifest your own destiny. It is not by being led through anger, wrath, things that are wild and out of control, the tools of the minions and demiurge, but rather through the peace known only by those who have the understanding of the good news, the truth of this ram, and our ultimate destiny, which is returning back to the pleroma. And as a result of knowing this, you can have peace overcome you and understand that pronoia is always conspiring. And pronoia, again, is one part of Borbella, which is the mother of creation. She is part of the androgynous pair of the monad, the father and the mother. The father being Bythos, the profound, and the mother being the container, who is 3 parts, thrice male, and one being pronoia. Pronoia is the spirit in all things conspiring in our favor, which is the opposite of paranoia. It is the faith that all things will settle into goodness. Excuse all the noise you hear in the background. I'm actually recording this in my car on a break. Let's continue. So Philip is essentially telling you that seek things that are going to bring about meditating, considering, planning ahead, cultivating, working hard, plowing the field, as he calls it, to bring about your nourishment, to bring about your pathway, to bring about your goals and aspirations. For to do otherwise is going to result in slowing things up and your own suffering. Understand that even the evil spirits, as he called them in prior video, can't escape, even if they wish. For the Spirit in all things corrals them to be tamed. So this is the way we have to understand this. The next section, Adam and Cain. The one created was noble, and you would expect his children to be noble. If he had not been created, but rather had been conceived, you would expect his offspring to be noble. But, in fact, he was created, and then he produced offspring. And what nobility this is! First came adultery, then murder. One was born of adultery, for he was the son of the serpent. He became a murderer, like his father, and he killed his brother. Every act of sexual intercourse between those unlike each other is adultery. So let's unpack this. First off, the difference between being created versus being conceived. And remember, Mary conceived the Christ, as we talked about in the previous video. And the Christ is within all of us. And the Christ is the perfect human. That being that was emanated from the Mother-Father as the first providence or evidence of the will of the Father, contained in the vessel known as the Mother. That is the Christ in all things. It is the emanation that is the perfect thing, the whole thing, that we are intended to be from the beginning. Those things that are created, on the other hand, are from the demiurge. To create something is merely to take from the essence of what is, and what is that thing called I am, and to take that substance, that essence, and formulate your own manipulation, or your own piece of art, if you will, your craftiness. Now, in this, you see that the demiurge goes about to form and fashion and to create, whereas the Mother-Father, the monad, emanates, and then we conceive what is being emanated. To conceive is to have an understanding about your path to fullness. And so with Mary, she understood her path, her purpose was to conceive of the Christ, and that became her conception. So you see the relationship between the Mother-Father. The Mother-Father emanates and we conceive. In the same section, in the second phrase, and he talks about how because Adam partook of this ram, it brought about adultery and interchange with the serpent. And remember that in many Gnostic texts we talk about the serpent either in a way that is crafty, manipulative, or in a wise way. So you have to keep this in context. You can't just simply use the word serpent. The main thing here is as being good or evil, but it can be either depending on the context. The main thing to recall here is that the serpent represents that being that has wisdom and is crafty and can be utilized as a tool toward either good or evil. And in this instance, Philip is using the serpent as a symbolic gesture of evil. So he says, one was born of adultery, for he was the son of the serpent. And the serpent here, again, is wise and crafty, but not necessarily good. But when Christ, of course, compares himself to a serpent, he is wise and crafty, but of course he is good. It isn't the tool itself that is a bad or good. It's what you do with the tool, the intention, the motivation that makes something good or bad. And so he became a murderer like his father, and he killed his brother. And who is his father? The father being Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge, working through the four elements, Jehovah. And so he goes out and he slays his brother, because this is the beginning of death, you see. Every act of sexual intercourse between those unlike each other is adultery. Next section, God the dyer. God is a dyer, just as the good dyes, said to be genuine dyes, dissolves into what is dyed in them. So also those whom God dyes become immortal through his colors, for his dyes are immortal, and God dips those to be dipped in water. So this is a pretty obvious one. Philip is saying that God is in everything, and he will permeate everything, and he will change everything to his understanding, which in this case would be the color of the dye, whatever that color happens to be, but it's doing it so through dissolution, dissolving everything. Ultimately, it will purify everything, and it will bleed into all of creation and all of emanation in all things. Next section, seeing. People cannot see anything that really is without becoming like it. It is not so with people in the world who see the sun without becoming the sun, and see the sky and earth and everything else without becoming them. Okay, I'm back from my vehicle and picking up again on section called Seeing. Philip continues saying, people cannot see anything that is really without becoming it. It is not so with people in the world who see the sun without becoming the sun, and see the sky and earth and everything else without becoming them. Rather, in the realm of truth, you have seen things there and have become those things. You have seen the Spirit and have become Spirit. You have seen Christ and have become Christ. You have seen the Father and will become Father. Here in the world you see everything, but do not see yourself. But there in that realm you see yourself, and you will become what you see. So this is Philip talking about our power to create whatever we want. But in order to create what we want, we have to first become that something that we are seeking. Example of that is that we track on the spiritual level what we are spiritually. Like attracts like. On the physical level, however, it's the opposite, as they're polar opposite. This is the realm of duality. And so you have the flesh attracting the opposite, and vice versa. So what happens is, one never really gets to know their full selves until they realize this truth, understanding and seeing. What you see within you spiritually becomes what is outside of you spiritually, in the realm of the spiritual. But in the realm of the flesh, it takes on the opposite of that. Meaning, in other words, people rarely find themselves, and they become everything else other than they are. They become the sun, they become the sky, they become the earth, but they never become themselves. In order to become oneself, one must find truth. And of course, Nag Hammadi Library, the Gnostic text, provides this truth through the teachings of Christ. The teachings of Christ reveal to us to follow one's essence, one's being, is to find truth, and therefore become whatever it is you see within yourself. So that's why he leads it up with saying people cannot see anything that really is without becoming like it. So you must first become it within yourself. And a worldly example might be that if you're attracting a partner, maybe a life partner, and you want that partner to have certain qualities, you must first become those qualities, and then that partner will come to you, and vice versa. So that's how it works. That's why you will often see people who are very similar in their temperament and their approach in life be in a relationship with one another. And typically, when it's very uneven, those relationships typically don't stand as high a chance of surviving. So this is one of the Gnostic mysteries of the universe and how things work, how to manifest things into this realm, but more importantly, into the realm of truth, which is, of course, the higher realms that we want to ascend toward. And you can ascend in this lifetime and the life to come, and all the lives to come. The next section, faith and love. Faith receives, love gives. No one can receive without faith, and no one can give without love. So if you don't really believe you're worthy to receive something, then you're going to reduce the chances that you'll actually be open to even considering it, much less noticing it, that it exists out there for you. So how can you receive it? So you must believe that it's possible for you. And this is one of the examples I often use. If you don't believe you can be an Olympian, then you'll never be an Olympian. But if you at least believe that you might be an Olympian, then you might not be, but you at least have the small chance that you might become an Olympian. Love, on the other hand, gives. No one can receive without faith, and no one can give without love. So you must have love in order to have compassion or a compulsion to give something to anything. If someone gives without love, that person gets no benefit from what was given. And here again reminds you of that teaching that Christ set forth about don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing when you give. So you have to give without a sense of consciousness. It's not from your mind or from your brain, but it's coming from your heart, from your essence. You feel moved to give of your compassion or to give of your love. Love is something you give freely. Anyone who receives something but does not receive the Lord is still a Hebrew. When he talks about Hebrew, he's setting forth the understanding of the old law, meaning the Mosaic law, the Levitical law, the demiurge, and all of its minions and dogma that want to keep you in bondage to the stone tablet that's hung around your neck to make you heavy and feel worthless. So anyone who receives something but does not receive the Lord, and the Lord here is referring to the Christ, and Christ is the essence of compassion or love and faith. So he's saying that you must receive faith, you must receive the Lord. Otherwise, you are going to be bound to law. And law is filled with destruction and death, and it leads to death and suffering and hate, ultimately. We'll hate ourselves, and as a result, we'll project hate onto the world. So he's essentially equating the old way of thinking to having no love to give and no faith to receive. And he calls it Hebrew. Now, he differentiates that with a new understanding of what it means to be a human, which is the word Christ-like or Christian. This is really what was the original intention or understanding of the word Christian, is to be Christ-like, not to be Moses-like or Jehovah-like or Paul-like or Peter-like, but rather Christ-like. So if you want to understand how to be Christ-like, you must follow the teachings of Christ. All the other scriptures are merely human beings' attempts at teaching the Christ. But all the red letters, the things that Christ actually said and spoke, those are the things that are as close as we're going to get to understand the essence of creation, the essence of emanation, the essence of the monad, the mother, father, the pleroma, the Christ, the Sophia, and the truth of all things. So that's what you really want to receive. That thing called the Lord is another way of saying the Christ. The next section follows up with Jesus' names. So here we start to, in order to receive this thing called the Lord or the Christ, we must understand its different names. Just as we must understand our own name, when we first come into this world, we're given a name, and eventually we come to know that, and it becomes our first sense of identity. And so here, Philip follows up faith and love section with Jesus' names. The apostles who came before us used the names Isos Nazareos, Messias, which means Jesus the Nazarene, the Christ. The last name is Christ. The first name is Jesus. The middle name is the Nazarene. Messias has two meanings. It means the Christ and measured. And Christ also means the anointed. And measured is something we use to bring about an understanding of how things unfold. There's a process. So we're going to talk about this later on and why he brings up this idea about Messias also meaning measured. In Hebrew, Jesus means redemption, and to be redeemed is to be redeemed from this world. Nazareth means truth, and so the Nazarene means truth. Christ has been measured, thus the Nazarene and Jesus have been measured out. So the Christ is that thing that has a path, that it follows. It's measured, meaning it is fated. It is a pathway that is set forth. But Jesus, the man, is outside of that path. So he's measured out of that path. He's not part of that path. He is merely a container, the vessel. And this world that we live in, the way in which the energy is in bondage to the corrupt flesh is what brings it to the level of corruption. But otherwise, all of creation is the body of Sophia. And that body is not evil, it's of the body of Sophia, therefore it is good. And so when Sophia is setting forth her body, which is the Jesus, it's the male form of the Christ. Sophia, in all of the different incarnations, whether it be aeonic expressions, whether it be the three Marys, it be Eve, it be Lilith, so forth and so on, these are different names of the Sophia. And so to Christ, Jesus, or the Christ in the male form, the Christos, the anointed, has different names. And the man Jesus is actually the vessel that carries the Christ, just like we all have our first name, for example, that carries the Christ within. The Jesus man is that vessel that is emanated as that first man that was able to carry the Christ. The first female to carry that Christ was Mary, who is another expression of Sophia. So this is what you have. And so Jesus has been measured out, meaning that he is of the flesh. He's not spiritual. He's not a spiritual being. He's a flesh being. And the Nazarene is the middle name. The Nazarene is Nahash. It comes from the word Nahash, of the essence of the serpent. And the serpent is also of this ram. As you recall, serpent that was in the garden. So this is the man and the serpent. And the Christ is the one that is the measured out. He's the measured one, meaning that he's perfect. So if you had to measure him as though he were a physical entity, which Christ is spiritual essence, but if you were to measure it, it would be of the perfect dimensions. So that's what it means, measured. The Nazarene, however, is of the serpent, and the Christ is of the man, or the Jesus is of the man. Those are measured out of that. So the Jesus dies on the cross, but the Nazarene, that becomes hidden away in this realm. So the serpent, as you recall, when Eve partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Lord God said that I will bruise your heel and then bruise your head, going into amnesia about gnosis. So the Nazarene is the hidden gnosis. It's the snake. It's the serpent, the essence of the serpent. And there was enmity between the man and the serpent. And so they forever were measured out. They were forever cast aside. One who became ignorant, that was bruised on the head and unable to recall gnosis. The other was bruised on the heel, so that they were cursed to not carry the gnosis out and proclaim it to the world. And so the Christ came to redeem both the serpent, or that event that the Lord God cursed about Eve, which is the serpent, the Nazarene, the essence of the serpent, and the essence of the bodily man, the Jesus. And this is what it means. So these two were measured out, and Christ came back to measure everything back in, to bring it back to fullness and perfection. The next section is titled A Pearl in Mud. And recall in the Gospel of Thomas we talked about the pearl, to guard it. Find the precious pearl and guard it. And that precious pearl is the thing that's most valuable to you. Where your treasure is, so is your heart. And where your heart is, so is your treasure. And when you open up the treasure box, there lies the pearl. If a pearl is thrown into mud, it will not lose its value. And if it is anointed with balsam, it will not increase its value. It is always precious in its own owner's eyes. Likewise, the children of God are precious in the eyes of the Father, whatever their circumstances of life. Now, this one's pretty self-explanatory. So, in the eyes of the true Father, Mother, no matter if we are rolling around in mud, which one could think of as sin, if you want to think of it that way. The Proto-Orthodox will call it sin. The Gnostic will call it ignorance or error in thinking. It doesn't matter. You still haven't lost value in the eyes of the Mother Father. You're still loved. You are still perfect. And you only need to increase in your understanding and gnosis and continue to grow. So this is all that you need to know about the pearl. And once you find that pearl, then you go out and you guard it, and you make it become real. In that instance, everybody has a different pathway of what that is. Some may want to do this for a living, others this for a living, so forth and so on. Perhaps your love is even just to be a saint or a servant of God, and you want to go back to the pleroma, and that's it. And that's fine as well. The next section. Now here is where Philip brings forth a new understanding of what it means to be human. Before, among the Jewish and the Israelites, they were known as the Hebrew. And he obviously said that that's the old way of thinking and understanding things. Now let me introduce to you a new term. And we, of course, all know this term, the name Christian. And he says, if you say, I am a Jew, no one will be moved. If you say, I am a Roman, no one will be disturbed. If you say, I am a Greek, barbarian, slave free, no one will be troubled. If you say, I am a Christian, the world will be shaken. May I receive the one whose name the world cannot bear to hear. Philip is telling you that the true message of Christ results in two outcomes. Everything else is acceptable. If you want to be Jewish, the world will accept you. In fact, in today's world, if you're Jewish in the nation of Israel, many nations will send you lots of billions of dollars every year to support your cause. And in the past, when you were Roman and they dominated the world, then that was considered nobility and you were part of the Roman Empire. And even today, the Roman Empire has morphed into the largest religion on the face of the earth, which is the Catholic Church. And then, of course, Greek is our philosophy even today. It's the classical understanding of democracy and the republic for which it stands. And so you can be all these things and it's acceptable. It is the way of the world. Because the demiurge has in common in each of these one thing, and that's control. Control of you. And that's why he says, a Greek, barbarian, slave, or free. And he continues and he says, however, if you're a Christian, there's two things to note. Now, in today's world, what it means to be a Christian is not the same as what it was when Philip was alive. In today's world, it's perfectly okay to be Christian. It's acceptable. And that, in fact, tells you that it is not really what Christ taught from the beginning. It's not really Christianity. Because if it were, there would be two things to identify it in name as Christian. That's why he calls it just a name, but actual Christian. And these are the two things he points out. The first one is the world would be shaken. So in other words, they won't have it. It will disturb them. It will move them. They'll do everything to destroy it, destroy the message that you're trying to share. And they will call you crazy. They'll call you heretical. In many cases throughout history, they burned you on stakes even. They killed you. They ridiculed you, very poorly treated you. And in today's world, yes, there's a growing body on YouTube and a couple books that have come out since the Nag Hammadi library was found in 1945. But that's only because Gnostic Christianity is a very small part of the whole. And it's not threatening. But as this movement grows, you will see that it will begin to be shut down. And the second thing they do is what I just said. May I receive the one whose name the world cannot bear to hear. What I just said. They will shut it down because they can't bear to hear it. And this is testimony to it being truth. There's something in this universe, something in this realm, on this planet. Call it what you want, aliens, demons. It exists. It's evident through the very fact that anyone that attempts to bring the Gnostic truth and understanding is silenced, whether it be through stifling free speech or putting people to death, or ridiculing them, or putting them in exile, or excommunicating them. And this is a testimony, not only to this being the truth, but testimony to the fact there is an actual entity that exists. Now, rather, Philip is describing this entity because it's an alien, foreign alien entity, or it's because there really are spirits and therefore it says there's a God and there's a demiurge. That's up to you to determine. But at least for Philip, he's extending that it's something spiritual. And if he's told us the truth up to that point, and he's got the inside scoop, then why would we question his reasoning? He seems like a very intelligent man. So at any rate, the point here is that today's Christians aren't shaking in their boots. Nobody is trying to shut them out. In fact, they are the majority of the planet. Of the 7 billion people, almost 3 billion people are Christian or call themselves Christian. The remaining are broken up between Muslims, Hindus, Jewish, Buddhist, so forth and so on. Atheists, agnostics, secular humanists. The next section, God is a man-eater. God is a man-eater, and so humans are sacrificed to him. Before humans were sacrificed, animals were sacrificed, because those to whom they were sacrificed were not gods. So what is it saying here? There's the spiritual man and there's the flesh man. The flesh man belongs to the animals. And we talked about this earlier when we talked about animal food versus spiritual food. I think it was in video 1 or 2. But the animal that was being sacrificed, that humans ate of, you are what you eat, as they say, is because humans were acting as though they were animals. And even today, the vast majority of people act as though they are animals. And so they continue to sacrifice. They sacrifice animals, and they eat animals, and therefore they're animals. But God is a man-eater, meaning, in other words, God consumes the man. Christ consumes the man. Christ consumes everything. And eventually humans will be dissolved into God, back into God. And so humans will be sacrificed to him. The word sacrificed, which comes from sacred, also we get similar words like sacred, sacrifice, sacrament. All of these words are stemming from adversity. We also get the word Satan, by the way, from a similar stem. S-A-C-R, S-A-T, these actually stem, those words stem from the same understanding, root etymology, which is the adversary. So God is a man-eater, so humans are adversary to him, sacrifice to him. So humans are actually standing against God, but in the end, they will not be able to withstand him. God will, in the end, consume the human. That's what it's saying. So that's not God saying that he's looking for the sacrifice as a way to appease his anger, as the proto-Orthodox Christians will like to tell you, but rather he's doing it because man requires to be sacrificed, because that's the way they understand. This ram, they worship the Satan. This is the God of this world, Satan. And so the human being believes they need to be sacrificed in order to be redeemed. That's the way they came to this ram, to accept that understanding of themselves. They accept they were worthless. And in order to believe you're worthless, you must sacrifice that part of you. You know, Christ always says it all the time. He says, do away with the old wine so that you may fill the skins with the new wine. So it's the same thing here. God is a man-eater. And this also is beginning to follow up with that understanding, whether it be a glassware or a ceramic or a wineskin. These are all the same thing. Essentially, that they're vessels that are being used to a higher purpose. And that brings us into the next section. Glass and ceramic vessels are both made with fire. So the same thing here. Everything is trying us so that we can be perfected. Remember earlier we talked about the two ways to be baptized, which means to be purified, water and fire. If glass vessels break, they are redone, since they have been made through breath. But if ceramic vessels break, they are destroyed, since they have been made without breath. So he's using this analogy of glassware versus ceramicware. And the glassware is something that you can actually see through. It's almost like it's invisible, and just like the spirit. So if you are, and the breath is like the spirit, it is the spirit. The breath of life is the spirit. And this is what he's referring to. So if glass vessels break, they are redone, since they have been made through breath. In other words, you're a spiritual being. You're just broken, and you just need to be redone through fire. However, ceramic vessels that are not see-through like glass, that is something that they are destroyed, since they have been made without breath, and they're not spiritual. So the flesh side part of ourselves is not of the spiritual nature, so it just gets destroyed. All right, the last section, a donkey turning a millstone. A donkey turning a millstone walked 100 miles. When it was set loose, it found itself in the same place. Some people travel long distances but get nowhere. By nightfall, they have seen no cities or villages, nothing man-made or natural, no powers or angels. These miserable people have labored in vain. What is it talking about? So first off, the donkey that's turning the millstone, he's in bondage. He walked 100 miles, and he's in bondage. He is burdened with labor. Think about the world that we live in. It centers around work. Isn't it interesting that you are awake about 16 hours, but the vast majority of that time you're working? Rather, once you get up in the morning, you spend about an hour getting ready for work, and then you then you drive to work, maybe another 15 minutes to an hour, and then you go to work and you spend 8 hours going to work. And so already that's about 8.5 hours. And then you spend another 30 minutes to an hour coming home. So you spent 10 hours getting ready for work, working, and coming home from work. And then once you get home from work, then you have to do more work, more labor. You have to cook meal, you have to cook dinner, you have to take care of the kids if you have kids, or the dogs. You have to clean your house, you have to pay your bills, you have to fill out applications. So you're constantly laboring. This is what it's referring to. A donkey turning a millstone walked 100 miles. When it was set loose, it found itself in the same place. So in this realm, you can't escape it. It's just the nature of this realm, because of the way people orient themselves to God and the universe, and to themselves and others. They have made that into the purpose of humanity. And the reason they have made it into the purpose of humanity is because of those that control humanity, uses them as slaves so that they may mine precious minerals and all kinds of other things so that these other beings can have luxury and power over us and be worshipped and venerated, you see? So whether you think you're being set loose from the millstone or not is inconsequential because you can't escape it. It's everywhere. What Philip is telling you, you have to first understand the truth of what is before you understand what you're up against. So he says, some people travel long distances but get nowhere. By nightfall, they have seen no cities or villages, nothing man-made or natural, no powers or angels. In other words, none of this is natural. None of this is actually man-made. Everything that we're making is not from man. It's from, you want to call it aliens or gods or demons, whatever you want to call it. It's because of what they want, whether it's the wars or it's the skyscrapers or highways or whatever it is. This is all by design. It was never natural from the beginning. Humans did not evolve naturally. They were intruded on and taken over and be made, and a millstone was put around every human being. And they were told, this is what you'll be. And you must be this, because if you don't be this, then we'll see to it that you won't be able to survive. Either that you can't pay for your food, or you can't have a house to live in so you can stay warm, or you'll get killed in some way, send you off to war, or create you into a criminal. So these miserable people have labored in vain. In the end, you die. You don't take anything you worked for with you. All of these great cities and tall buildings and fast cars and all these things, those are not going to be things that you can own or take with you. So this is the section called A Donkey Turning a Millstone. All right, we're going to leave it there. We're going to pick up on the next section in the next video titled The Eucharist and Jesus. Talk to you again soon. Bye. Blessed day.